Today we're going to be talking about a weapon that had a stealth change that I haven't really seen anyone talk about, and because that's kind of what happens with stealth changes. But somebody actually reached out to me in my email. They said, hey, could you check out the RPD? I think they modified the recoil from how it used to work. So we're going to take a look at that and how that actually impacts the weapon, because there's a lot of people in my comment section saying this is a sleeper of a weapon, it is the meta, and all those types of things. So we'll take a look at that and kind of figure out how good this weapon is and if it's worth using within the current meta, regardless if you're playing Rebirth or you're playing Verdansk. If you enjoyed the video, learn something new, please do me a favor, hit the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Let's get into it. So the main thing we want to talk about with the RPD is the recoil pattern. So that's what we're going to focus on first. And then that one we'll be able to dive into the TTK, how the weapon works and where it stacks up against the competition. So what I have right here is obviously we don't have ways to really test things. There's no plunder, there's no clash, there's no any of these other modes. So I was able to go into a pregame lobby, use the MP5 as a comparison of what it used to look like. And then we have the RPD. In case you guys didn't know, what was unique to the Cold War MP5 and the RPD is you would fire about 18 bullets and then all of a sudden the recoil would just stop. The MP5 still works that way. I kind of just double checked the MP5 because it was feeling really good recently, even though, you know, I still prefer the OTS. And what you'll notice is I have a little bit of a line here that pops up on screen, and that'll be able to show the elevation of the recoil without me adjusting it. And you'll kind of see what happens. So as soon as it gets to a certain point, you can see it no longer moves vertically. And that's what we've done with that one. And the RPD used to do the exact same thing. And now it actually continues going all the way up at a consistent pace. And in reality, even though this is a change, it actually makes the weapon easier to control, surprisingly, because normally how you control recoil is you pull down with your mouse. With your mouse, you just go ahead and pull down slowly at a consistent pace. And the key with the recoil patterns, the easier ones to control, is the consistency. If one kind of just shoots left, right, or has a big jump and then a little jump, it's very hard to control those micro manipulations. With the controller, it gets even harder because generally you just pull in one direction about a certain percentage, and that's kind of it. So if I want to hold a particular recoil, all I do is pull this amount, figure out kind of where it stops moving, essentially because it's consistent. And as soon as I put it at that one spot, I do not need to move it, and it will continue to shoot straight without any side-to-side movement because it doesn't have any. And as long as I hold it at that 20%, 50%, depending on your sensitivity and aim down sight sensitivity, and if you have aim assist on somebody, you will be able to adjust that, and then you'll just be able to not miss, which is incredibly important. That's a huge factor in if a gun is going to be meta, is ease of use. And this is kind of overlooked in some cases, but we'll go ahead and rewatch this over so you can see it goes straight vertical and then it just stops. Typically with an SMG, you get the quick 12, 13 shots in, so you don't really have to worry about this. And then you let go of the trigger and then it starts over that recoil pattern. And that's what you'll typically see, where it's not going to be an issue with the MP5. But normally at range, you might take on a target and then automatically swap over to another target, especially if you have a 75 round mag or whatever you'd call it with the LMG. And you can see it just goes straight vertical without any side-to-side wobble. And that is relatively easy to control. You just pull down a fixed amount and pretty much you will not have recoil beginning to end. And I think that's what a lot of people will like about the RPD. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the weapon stats. So there's a couple things to worry about when it comes to the RPD. You got to understand the damage, how many shots to kill, and how many shots you need to lower the TTK. Normally you want a TTK right around 700 without anything going on. And normally a lot of the meta weapons right now are right around that 700 TTK, 720. So it's right at that borderline there with 736. And we can see right here, if you got total headshots, which would be 6 out of 6, aimbot level stuff, it's unrealistic. 99% of the time when you use the RPD, you're going to get a 736 TTK, and that does not even include the openable delay, which is approximately 50 milliseconds. So in reality, this number is closer to 786. And we'll kind of talk about why that number is important. If you end up getting one headshot, which is very possible within 9 shots, Not 100% of your gunfights, but very possible in a lot of them, especially if somebody's on a head glitch, you can get it down to 644, especially since the damage profile is fairly consistent across the body. It will always be 9 unless you get the headshot in the mix. When we actually start to compare this, it becomes incredibly important when we look at the overall TTK compared chart, which all this spreadsheet is linked in the description. So if you want to go ahead and check it out, it will be there. So we'll go ahead and zoom out just a little bit. And for this, the purposes of this, you can kind of see where the RPD lines up. I included it where it has a one-shot TTK. So any of the times you do get a headshot in the mix, this thing is pretty competitive. But add 50 milliseconds to that, and we're talking closer to like 700 TTK. There's a lot of guns that can get 700 TTK, the grab, without any headshots. Gives that similar TTK, no open bolt delay. If we go ahead and go to a lot of these other weapons, the AMAX is still pretty competitive. You almost might as well use the AMAX because even without the open bolt delay, you get a better TTK. We have the FFAR, a little bit harder to control, but the TTK is nasty. The EM2, which is arguably the best gun currently to use besides the AK-47 or XM4 for the average player. Below average players will probably mostly stick with the QBZ. But even in these cases, you're talking about getting 679, no open bolt delay. And that's regardless of where you hit the target. If you manage to get 2 headshots, you can get it down to 568, which deletes. 700, it'll be faster, but when you're combining it, it's like, well, what the issue? Personally, the biggest issue with the RPD, in my opinion, is that rate of fire. You're not really maximizing the consistency. A lot of times, the LMGs that perform the best or weapons that perform the best is a higher rate of fire if the weapon is going to be slow, because then you end up aiming down sight. You fire. If you miss, obviously it's easier now. You might run into some issues. So overall, I think it is a good LMG. But the MG82 is significantly better in a lot of ways, namely the fire rate, which leads to a significantly faster TTK. You'd probably be better off using the Fin Adverse, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's technically better than the RPD. The RAL is in contention with being as good as the RPD. It just has a slower fire rate. So there are a lot of good options, and there's no real reason to use the RPD other than the fact that it has low recoil. So I would imagine if you are a lower skilled player, then you might like the RPD because it's just easier to use than something like the Stoner or one of these other various weapons. So is it meta? No, I think there's probably about 8 to 10 weapons that you would just stack ahead of it that are ranged weapons. And for that reason, I don't think it's ever going to be meta until they increase the rate of fire, which they typically do not do, or they increase the damage so that you get that headshot damage to the chest without having to land a headshot. We'll kind of see how that goes. Regardless of that, when it comes to the loadout, you're going to use the Grew Suppressor, Task Force Barrel, Spetsnaz Grip. You could get rid of the Spetsnaz Grip if you want to get a stock or a laser so you have a little bit more mobility, or you could even put this as like a bruiser grip so you get a better hip fire if somebody is close, even though you're not going to use it that way, but you will get that extra movement speed, which could be important in some scenarios. Or you could just go for a bigger magazine and just go 120 and still have the Serpent Wrap for a better aim down sight on the 3X, or go with the stock. But overall, this is kind of how I would use it. And then you just got to worry about that reload in between. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video, learned something new. If you did, please do me a favor, hit the like button if you're brand new, want to find your way back. Double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.